Greetings, friends, and welcome to Captain Samuels.
Sorceress six-gun shootouts.
Yeah, buddy. Well, we've got Jeff here today. Jeff from Jeff's Cave of Cool Books. And he has a deep knowledge of pulp books, men's adventure stories, hardboiled detective stories, and westerns. And Jeff and I did a buddy read of Spectros by Logan Winters, a pen name for Paul Lederer, who wrote many westerns. It was first published in 1981, and it is a western with fantasy elements. So, Jeff, welcome, my friend.
Welcome, glad to be here. I know you were very kindly saying I was knowledgeable about westerns. I think I'm very knowledgeable about movie and TV westerns. I haven't read more. I probably read about a couple dozen actual western novels, but I think the tropes are fairly similar across the board, and that's a very common. When I read this Spectros book, it read just like many other westerns I've read and watched. There's a lot of characters, and they all get a little bit of business. This one, maybe again a lot of not all westerns have really vivid characters. They have types. Maybe they have the hard case, the store, the shopkeeper, the bar, the saloon owner, etc., and the tin horn gamblers. And there's a lot of types. Really good Western writers can make them flesh them out completely, or at least enough to give them some colorful background. Um, but this one didn't do that much. We'll talk about that later. But
Yeah.
I found it was a pretty typical Western in a lot of ways, and I was expecting a little more. In the 70s when this came out, I don't know if you want to talk about the writer or when it came out. I believe this
Go ahead,
was
yeah.
late 70s. Well, I didn't catch quite the exact publication date, but I believe it was in the late 70s, and this was in the men's adventure time, and there were a lot of start of the adult westerns, with lots of blow by blow gynecological detail sex scenes, and I kind of
Yeah.
expected a bit of that, but this was not. This was very a straight up western with just some magical elements. Kind of, and they were central to the story in parts, I guess, but like you mentioned, they were kind of uh, you know, kind of window dressing more than anything, maybe. What is your overall impression, having never read? Is this your first Western?
Yeah, so this is the first Western I've ever read. So basically, it was about this guy named Dr. Spectros, and his girlfriend has been put.
Fiance,
Was that
bride. I
right?
think
Fiance,
they were
yeah,
married. Yeah, they had just gotten married, and then she was abducted from under his nose, so to speak.
yeah. I think the plot summary here is going to be a team effort between us because there's a lot of moving parts for this thin book, and in the Western genre, there's a lot of moving parts. So,
Yeah,
yeah, basically,
action has to come.
yep. Spectros's fiance, I believe, somehow he found himself in India or some other East Asian
Mm.
country. I think it was India. And while he was
Yes.
there, he learned magic from some kind of magician. And there was a rival named Blackshuster. And Blackshuster, out of jealousy, put Spectros's fiance. I forget her name. I don't know if you know what her name
I
was.
forgot her name too, but yeah. Well, I got the
Christina.
impression, Sam, that he didn't know magic until
Yeah.
Black Schuster or Black Schuster abducted his bride, and he went off and learned his magical ways, his sorceress ways to combat Black Schuster. And Black Schuster desired this beautiful. I guess she was a princess, an Indian princess or something, and
Yeah.
Spectros had done some kind of assistance and kind of just befriended this royal family for some service, and was off to marry the daughter. And um, Black Schuster keeps her in suspended animation, and it
That's
needs
right.
silver to do it in this spell. And he
Yeah.
sometimes coos at her and touches her cheek, and he could do a lot worse. So luckily, he didn't go beyond that. But
Yeah. Yeah.
anyway, through the decades, maybe even centuries, Spectros has been chasing Black Schuster to try to get this woman back. And he's an old man now, and he can magically turn into a hawk. And we also can see him turn into the most badass gunslinger of the Old West, Kid Soledad, but it takes a lot out of him and he needs months to recuperate. And in the
Yeah.
meantime, he travels around in this little wagon, like, a doctor peddling. In a lot of old Western movies, you see the guy peddling some kind of snake oil salesman or something,
Yeah.
but he's not selling anything. He's just traveling around and resting in this place. And he's got three assistants of different skill sets that he's helped out in the past, and they're kind of, I guess, beholden to him in some ways, and go along and help him out in various quests as they try to catch up to Black Schuster and never quite seem to get there, and they get involved in some local adventures along the way. Does that kind of sound like the general scheme of the way things are going, Sam?
Yeah, that sounds about right. And it actually opens up where um, one of Spectros's buddies, Ray Featherskill, because a lot of characters, I need the back of the book to tell me which one's which.
Ray
Yeah,
Featherskill,
they're
Montauk,
on the
the mountain
train.
man giant that's
Yep.
mute, and Inkada, who I'm guessing is a Turk or a Sikh or something, maybe a Sikh because he has a turban and has a badass big carved knife that plays into the plot later.
Yeah. Yep. Those are
Those
those are
are
the
his
characters,
three
and it
aides.
starts out with Featherskill's perspective, and he's on a train with Black Shuster and Christina, who's in suspended animation, and they don't know it. And so there's like a little bit of a murdery mystery as the train conductor and one of the other people on the train gets killed, and then Black Shuster um, makes a getaway. And so the book kind of jumps from perspective to perspective. So it starts out with Ray Featherskill, the gunslinger on the train, and then it goes to um, Inkata, who is in the back of the book described as a Moor, which I guess is like a catch-all term for what you described, like someone from the Indian region. And he falls in with the other type of Indians, if you will, the Native Americans. So he fights them and then falls in with their group. And then there is Spectros himself, who's getting up to adventures. And then also you've got the lady that's trying to sell her silver mine, and Black Shuster's trying to rip her off. And then you've got a whole bunch of characters that are also trying to rob the bank, and Black Shuster's trying to rob the bank because he needs the silver from the bank to continue Christina's suspended animation. And then you've got the magical horse running around, and so
Comes in, yeah.
comes in, yeah, the horse. And so basically, I actually sat down before we did this an hour or two before. And I was like, okay, I read the book 2 weeks ago. Let me just like review and make sure I remember who the characters were. And I open it up and I'm like, oh my god, I have no idea who these people are. Jeff's gonna think I didn't read the book. And what it is every character in this book, even just like random faceless people that work on the train or like the town drunk, they all get names and they all get like little backstories, and then they might like have a name and a
Standard for
backstory.
westerns,
Yeah,
yeah.
and then they just like get shot, like a red shirt. But because they're named and they have all this background info, and it jumps between different characters so much, um, when they'd get to a new character, I'd be like, "Who's this?" and like, "Why are they fighting that?" Like, I don't know, like, what's going on? Did you have that at all, or?
But I know the characters okay.
So it basically has a lot of different characters. You've got Ray Featherskill, who's like a gunslinger, Dr. Spectros, who is an alchemist and can turn himself into an even more amazing gunslinger, Kid Soledad, as well as
It's
like
Soledad,
Kid
yeah.
Soledad, yeah. And
All the bad guys tremble when they hear his name.
they do, and he's got
The
like
fastest gun alive.
he's got a cool black hat with silver buckle. And then,
And a cool black horse.
yeah, Compson. And then there's Montauk, who's like a strong guy who can't talk. There's
Yeah, he's
Inkata.
a mute, like the mountain man, and he's good with the knife or a fist
Yeah,
fight or whatever. And he's really kind of gentle soul. They always talk about his gentle eyes, and he doesn't really want to fight, but you're gonna force me, I'm gonna gut you, that sort of thing.
yeah. And then there's Inkata, who is, they call him a Moor on the back of this book, which I guess is like a
Maybe he's from the Middle East
Middle
then,
East,
but
yeah.
he wears a turban apparently,
And then you've
and has
got
a big bushy
three
beard.
bank robbers. Um, Black Shuster himself, who's like the evil opposing magician.
and his servant Wango.
Wango, yeah, he's like a murderous, axe murdering dude. And then Christina, who's kept in suspended animation by Black Shuster, and that is Spectros' rival, basically. And
Black
then you've
Schuster
got
is the
War
rival. Christina
Echo,
is the
who's
wife.
like a Native American person who's um, trying to invade the town. And then you got a lady that owns a silver mine. And then you've also got a cat who's just come here to join me. And so basically, the plot is pretty tricky to summarize because it jumps from character to character to character, um, and they each get their own little adventures, and it all is kind of tied together at the end. But all of the people, including just like random train conductors or like the town drunk who might get shot at the end, they're all named. They all have elaborate backstories, and so I kind of had a tricky time following who was who. And I was just curious, are other westerns structured like that, where you have so many different characters and it like jumps around so much?
Well, I can't speak for all westerns, but most that I've encountered, yes, they have a lot of characters, and I think not just westerns, but a lot of action genre books like of this type, like pulp adventure stuff. They're
Mm-hmm.
always hopping around between different characters. It's like when you watch a movie these days, and there's six different scenes happening, or just, little mini stories or
Yeah.
conflicts happening at the same time that the director flips back and forth through. That's quite common. I think that's very normal, and uh, some writers do it better than others. The thing about Paul Lederer, I guess, is the author's real name.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think he was who wrote a lot of westerns and some other books. I'm sure typical of people of that time writing many different books to make ends meet, I guess. But your cat is not pleased with this book either. But
He's having an adventure.
I
He helps me type sometimes, steps on the keyboard.
well, I think the thing that characterizes the Spectros books. I think they're Lederer is a pretty good writer, in my opinion, as far as he describes action well. He pauses a little bit to describe landscape here and weather occasionally, which is something common in westerns. Um, I think there's no humor,
Mm.
whereas in a I've read these I'm reading some of these books by an Australian writer named Marshall Grover, and he wrote this Larry and Stretch series, and he
Oh
also
yeah, I
wrote a
remember you
Big
telling me
Jim
about
series.
those.
There's
Yeah.
hundreds and hundreds of books in these series, and they're full of humor, and they have really colorful supporting characters, and so you can kind of keep them more clear in your mind.
Yeah.
I think the pencil sketches of the characters here are not always so vivid. The main you get a beat on the main assistants and maybe a couple of the main guys, main characters in each plot of each book, but
Hmm.
uh, I wouldn't say that they're very vivid.
I looked on Goodreads to see what other people thought of it, and one reviewer said that it seemed like a Doc Savage imitator. And I don't have a lot of experience with Doc Savage, but I know you just did a buddy read and like a panel discussion all about Doc Savage. So, what do you think? Is there some truth to that? Is this kind of a Doc Savage knockoff or kind of its own thing?
Definitely not a knockoff, I don't think. I think the only similarity is that there's a guy who has Doc in his name, and he
Okay.
has some dudes traveling with him, and they basically travel around and get in some adventures. But and somewhat colorful sidekick characters, but there's where the resemblance stops. Because Doc Savage, I think probably Paul Lederer is a better writer than a lot of the Doc Savage authors until maybe later in the pulp run where the prose gets more sleek. But
Hmm.
the character of Doc Savage is very active from the get go. He doesn't have any magic, but his science skills almost makes him superhuman in his physical skills. In contrast, Doc Spectros is very weak, old man, until
Hmm.
he channels his kid Soledad, where he's much younger and fit, but his power drains quickly, which is interesting. But he's kind of peripheral to the story until kind of the climax, I think, in most of these books, from what I can tell.
Yeah.
And as far as action and things, and the supporting characters in the Doc Savage, the assistants of Doc Savage, are really colorful guys, especially Monk and Ham, the two main ones, and there's a lot of humor with them insulting each other.
Yeah,
Maybe
the
not all of
bickering.
it lands these days,
Hmm.
but so they're very distinctive. Monk is like as wide as he is tall, and he's got,
Yeah,
they really, there's always these little pocket descriptions of the guys that make them very vivid. Like Long Tom, the electrical engineer, looks like, you could be knocked over by a 13-year-old girl, but he actually can wrestle his weight in Wildcats and stuff like that. They kind
nice.
of, it's a much more vivid description where I found Inkata, Ray Featherskill, and Montauk okay characters. They were cool. They didn't seem to be overly adept at anything, but other than Feather Skill is a good with the gun, and
Yeah.
they all seem like good guys, and they're good in a fight, etc. But they're maybe a little more colorless than the Doc Savage aides. The plots are very different, of course, because they're different genres. But
Hmm.
on the plus side, I do think this is a good Western. So, it's not a standout one, but it's certainly not. It doesn't let the side down for the genre. I think it has solid bad guy, kind of guest bad guys, and guest good guy characters or good gal characters. There's usually always a beautiful woman in the mix
Yeah,
somewhere,
there was
a
one in
pretty
this.
gal
Yeah,
in the mix somewhere.
yeah,
This, I'm guessing, that's standard for the genre, and showdowns and gunfights and that kind of thing. And I think Lederer delivers on all of those. So if you like the genre, which I do, then you won't be disappointed necessarily by these books, I don't think. But if you're not familiar with westerns, or you haven't tried them, or you're kind of gun shy about them, then this
hmm,
might not be the one to start with.
yeah. I was seeing about that. I went with this one because I like fantasy, I like science fiction, and I was like, well, if this has those elements in it, let me try some Spectros, so there'll be a little bit of the
Yeah,
familiar. But the
I
magic
think it was a
wasn't
good idea.
really, yeah, the magic wasn't really there. I mean, he turns into a wildcat and he turns into Kid Soledad, like a super good gunslinger. But other than that, there wasn't a whole lot of magic, and I almost kind of wish that I'd read a pure Western that was better put together as like a first impression, rather than like an okay one that had some extremely light fantasy elements. But it wasn't a great read for me, but I like to try something new, and I would definitely be willing to try again with a pure Western at your suggestion, maybe the Larry Stretches, or if you've got some other recommendations.
Yeah, I got several recommendations for you later of both weird westerns that are really fully embrace the supernatural part, or straight up westerns. But I wanted to ask you, what did you think of? I know you didn't. You kind of found the character too many characters, and they weren't that vivid, and the plot was pretty boilerplate, maybe, other than the magical elements. But
Hmm.
what did you think of the writing, the prose?
Prose was good.
Serviceable, or
Yeah, prose was good, and in fact, when the book started, I was very pumped for this because you've got this train rolling through the dark Midwest, and it's a night scene, and it's lonely and desolate. And he was painted a beautiful picture, and I was like, "Whoa, this is a good opening." And I liked how they didn't know it was in the back car of the train, and it turns out to be Blackchester. And when the train goes away and Featherskill goes after it, I was like, "All right, I want to see what happens next." And then it jumps to another character, and I'm like, "Oh, what? What's going on?" And then I was like, "Okay, I guess we're doing a second character here. That's cool." And then we went to character 3, and then we went to like character 4. And I think we were on like character 5 before we got back to Ray Featherskill, and we just kept cycling through. And so I loved his prose. I loved the action. It was well done, but it was almost like clicking through channels from a boxing match to a UFC match to a wrestling match to a kendo match to a baseball game, and each time you go back, you're like, wait, what's the score? Like, what's going on? But I will say that at the end, he tied it all together nicely, where all the characters kind of converge, and then Blackchester gets away, um, and he sets things up for the sequel. So it all came together at the end. But I would have preferred maybe if it was one or two characters more fleshed out, more colorful, like you'd mentioned, instead of a variety of sketches. And I also have to laugh that um, Dr. Spectros' ability is to turn into an additional character.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we don't have enough.
Well, I mean, it's essentially it's him, but yeah, a
Yeah.
younger version of him. But yeah, yeah, that is funny. He can also turn into animals, like you mentioned, which is
Yeah.
cool. That is an unusual twist. But again, they don't. The author doesn't really run with it like you might like. It's like kind of a half-ass. Oh, let's throw it just to be a gimmick. It's like just like a surface gimmick rather than really. Fully embracing the supernatural. But yeah, that's the thing when you have a crew of guys and they have to have something to do, right? It's just like when you watch
Yeah.
a TV series that's an ensemble. You're going to have this is the episode focusing on this guy, and we'll have a B story with this other
Yeah.
lady or whatever. But here it's in one book. So, Montauk goes off and does his adventures, and goes off and does his, and Featherskill's doing his, and the
Yeah.
doctor's waiting in the wings to take action. And then it all comes together at the end. And I think that's probably the formula of the series. And it's not unusual that way for these kinds of action genre books if they have recurring characters. So that if that's going to be the case, they need to be. Because I'm fine with that because I'm used to that kind of scenario, so it
Yeah.
doesn't bother me. But I would like more interesting assistant characters. I didn't find these guys to be particularly. They were fine. I mean, like you said,
Yeah.
the writing is good. So I'm hanging out with Ray Featherskill. Yeah, he seems cool, and I liked Montauk probably the best. Inkata probably has the least development, which is unfortunate. But he's cool enough too, I guess. But they're not, other than their physical appearances, they don't seem all that different when you're in with each one, if you know what I mean. So
Yeah.
I think that's the problem where he needed to put more effort into making those characters more unusual. But again, as a standard Western, I think he delivers. The writer delivers a good standard Western. So if someone's reading, I imagine Western fans would go, "Oh, that's interesting. There's some magic in here." Maybe they wouldn't like it. Maybe they're purists, but they could read this and go, "Oh yeah, that was a good Western." Put the book to the side, pick up the next one, right? Just nothing standing out other than the hero can turn him the main guy can turn himself into a younger badass version of himself, that kind of thing. So
Yeah. Well, that's good to know. For future westerns that I read.
if you think of a genre like hard-boiled detective fiction, and usually
Mhm.
they're first-person narration, and you're with that detective the whole way through. So there may be lots of characters that come in and they
Mhm.
get names and things quite often, but they, like in a Philip Marlowe novel or something, but it's all from the perspective of the detective.
Right.
So, and some westerns, a lot of Louis L'Amour westerns are written that way, where they're first person narration from the story might hop around, but it's the main character usually. Okay, he has other ones where it's third person omniscient or whatever, and it's
Yeah.
from there'll be perspective between like three characters or something. But yeah, I don't think it's par for the course, but I think for certain kind of pulpy western where there's a squad of characters, then they're going to try to give them something to do, and maybe separate them out to do different kinds of things. So it's probably back and forth. Like in the Larry and Stretch ones, they'll have Larry and Stretch are usually together, and then we'll get a cup like the sheriff of the book and the bad guys. So we'll hop between some different perspectives, but they're a little more vivid maybe there, so it wouldn't probably bother you as much because you feel like, okay, I'm in this guy's story now, but he's kind of interesting, so I'll follow along with him. So it might be something that you just have to get used to for that if you're going to read more of those. But
Yeah. Well, now I know
one of
what
the
to.
westerns I'm going.
Now I know what to expect.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to say the best ever western I've ever read that I'm going to recommend to you later has a jillion characters, but they are all extremely vivid. That's the one I would recommend to you if you were going to ever read another western. It's long, it's like 600 pages or so, but they made an amazing miniseries out of it with Robert
Hmm.
Duvall and Tommy Lee Jones as the main characters. The book is just fantastic. So it's a piece of literature, not just a western. So
Cool, man. Lonesome Dove by Larry McMasters, you said?
no, Larry McMurtry. Larry
Larry
McMurtry is
McMurtry. Okay.
I think he won. Did he win the Pulitzer for that? I forgot what, but he won some award, many awards for it. He wrote the Last Picture Show. If you ever saw that movie, he passed away a few years back, and he wrote some prequels and a sequel to Lonesome Dove, which are very good too. But you don't need to read those. Lonesome Dove stands alone by itself. So it's um it's a chonker, but you will be immersed in this world. So that's the absolute best. It's not the average western is just there's usually series or there's standalones, but they're kind of all in a their genre, and there's really good ones like Louis L'Amour, and then there's
Hmm.
ones that are just kind of boilerplate, and there's ones that are not so good, and then but um, you know people Lonesome Dove is a western, but it's fiction first. It's kind of
Yeah.
it's a piece of literature first, really. So highly recommend that one. As far as some supernatural ones,
Hmm.
um, Robert E. Howard wrote. I think the Robert E. Howard Foundation Press put out a weird western or a western set that has a bunch of a book,
Oh,
a volume
really?
that has a bunch of his weird westerns in there. But some of them are horror, so I know you're not big on horror. That's where when the western dips into weird, it's
Hmm.
more often horror elements, like vampires in the old west,
Yeah.
or like in Spectros later, there's supposed to be maybe werewolves or maybe
Hmm.
Bigfoot. Most complaints I've read about the Spectros series is there not enough of that stuff,
I
but
see. Yeah.
Joe R. Lansdale has written something called Dead in the West. It's like a zombie apocalypse in a western town, but
Hmm.
it's very violent and horrific. But it's worth checking out. And there's another guy. I don't think he wrote in Weird Tales, but he wrote in the pulps. His name is Lon Williams. He's not very well known, but you can find his like a mega pack on of a Kindle for real cheap. But his stories are about I think a sheriff in a town somewhere, and he deals with all sorts of supernatural creatures and things, and that's a cool little series. And he probably took a page out of Robert E. Howard's notebook and was inspired by him, but he did more of a recurring character thing. And there's another guy called James A. Moore, and he did a book not too long ago, maybe several. It's like a several novelettes or something called Boomtown. One word, James A. Moore, and it's a guy. I think it's like a white guy and an Indian, and they both have some magical powers, and
Hmm.
they get involved in all sorts of um, really crazy, monstery, werewolf clan. That's quite cool. So
Is that a
they are
modern
out
one?
there.
Is Boomtown like more modern or is that older?
It's written. No, yeah, it's only about 10 years old, I
Okay.
think, but it's set in the old west. But
Hmm.
yeah, and Larry McMurtry wrote Lonesome Dove, I think, in the 80s or maybe 90s. So
Hmm.
those are more recent ones, I guess. But yeah, Boomtown is I think just about 10 years old, if that, and by James A. Moore, but it's set in the Old West. So as far as current contemporary westerns, I can't think of any off the top of the head right now, but there are some out there that are good. So
Well, the
um,
Robert E.
so
Howard jumps out at me because I haven't reviewed him on my channel, but both between audiobooks and print books, I've read like almost all the Conan the Barbarian stories because I got that big, the black leather bound one with the gold leaf that everybody's got. Because yep, that one, yeah, I've
sure,
got that right on my bookshelf. And I love me some
a
Robert E.
beautiful
Howard, so
edition.
I'd probably start there with his weird Western stuff. And I can do a little horror. I don't really like modern slasher horror stuff, but the old
Yeah,
timey Baroque,
yeah, it's not so
Clark Ashton
colorful.
Smith
Yeah.
kind of stuff that I can do.
If you can handle Clark Ashton Smith, you can handle Lon Williams and Robert E. Howard stuff
Yeah,
for sure. James A. Moore is violent, but it's not quite as, I guess, grisly, I suppose. But it's
yeah.
pretty rough too. So you might want to. tread with caution with those. But yeah, I think Robert E. Howard you won't have much of a problem with. He can be very violent, but it's not so visceral. And
Yeah.
um, like horror of the mound or horror on the mound, where a rancher fights a Spanish vampire that's come alive again
Oh
when he
hell
unearths
yeah.
the crypt,
That
and
sounds
that kind of
good.
stuff. So that might be a good place to start. But those
Yeah.
Howard fully embraces. He writes straight westerns too, and he writes comedic westerns, or he
Huh.
wrote, I should say. But he has at least I think eight. At least weird Western tales. That collection is a combination of both, but they're kind of put together. So if you want to just focus on, some of them are ghost stories or ghostly revenge stories and things like
Yeah.
that. So
That sounds good. Clark Ashton Smith actually he did a whole series of tales set out in California. I don't know if those are Western, but maybe they're Western adjacent. I haven't read those myself. I just kind of know of them.
oh, I wasn't familiar with that. That's
Yeah.
cool. I know he's got these Zothique things and his ones. What's Avalon or Averone or something, where he has some kind
Yeah.
of fantastical settings in a fantastical France. He's a really
Yeah.
interesting writer.
Yeah, so initially, I've been pretty hard on this book, and I emailed Jeff that I gave it only 1 star. Ooh, but after hearing Jeff talk about how jumping between different characters is pretty common for westerns, I think I'm a little higher on the book. I might give it 2, maybe even 3 stars. Um, I do think though that I would like characters a little more interesting, a little more fleshed out, and maybe fewer of them. But I don't know that I'd try Spectros again, but I would definitely try, another Western and really appreciate that you gave me some recommendations, Jeff. And uh, I'm torn between wanting to try just like a straight up Western and really understand the genre by, just reading one and seeing what it's like in its pure form, or doing what I just did and be like, oh, I got to have a little bit of the fantastical and try some of the Robert E. Howard weird. But you can do both too. It's all good.
Well, I think if you get that Robert E. Howard Foundation press volume, and I think the trade paper is only about $20 from their website, and you might even be able to get a discount or something. They're really nice volumes. They're put together well, and they're probably 300-400 pages long. They have the original text. Sometimes they have, alternates or earlier versions. And that Western collection, it has like a giant monkey-looking thing jumping at a gunslinger shooting at it.
Well, that's awesome.
Um, it's yeah, it's a pretty cool cover.
Yeah.
It has, and all their books have the same cover artist, so they kind of fit together, which is nice. I think that includes weird westerns and Robert E. Howard some of his straight westerns, so you can get a sampling of
Okay.
both if you wanted to. And if you're going to read, Robert E. Howard's does westerns as well as any other general western author. So
Okay. Cool.
he's from Texas. He knows that he knows those tales in that area well. He did a lot of research, so you would be in good hands for his straight up westerns too.
Well, that's true.
So.
He's an actual cowboy because he's from Texas. Yeah.
Well, I know he had a lot. He knew a lot of cowboys and stories, and I think if he had not unfortunately killed himself, he would
Yeah.
have. He was moving into the Western market, and I think he probably would have been one of those guys pumping out those Western novels throughout the 50s and 60s if he had continued on, and he might have
Yeah.
been, rival Louis L'Amour for popularity for all we know, but. That's an alternate history we'll never see, unfortunately. But he was extremely prolific in his short life, and he wrote a lot of humorous westerns, which were selling very well for him. The Robert E. Howard Foundation Press just put out a collection of that. The Adventures of Breckenridge Elkins. Those are very kind of tall tale
Hmm.
about a big. Elkins is this big galoot, good-hearted galoot, and he's tougher than he is so tough, so and they're just kind of he gets in all sorts of misadventures, and they're kind of broadly comedic. They're very fun, but again, they're not ones that should maybe be read a bunch in order, just like with the Sailor Steve Costigan ones, where he's getting in a boxing match in
Yeah.
foreign ports in every book or whatever. But they're very enjoyable.
Yeah.
Taken, so there's a lot of different Western kinds of Westerns that he writes. But yeah, I wouldn't say you would be missing anything with the Spectros series, from what I can tell. I can see the Logan Winters, I guess his nom de plume,
Mm-hmm.
Fred Lederer, Fred Lederer, is that right? Paul Lederer.
Paul Lederer,
I
yeah.
can see how he's setting these up. Everyone has, Doc Spectros almost gets Black Schuster and almost
Yeah,
gets his
he just
bride to
gets
see the
away.
back,
Yeah.
but doesn't be, oh, I got to help one of my guys, or I'm here, I promised to help this lady in distress or this town in distress, and they have their adventure, and then, Black Schuster got away again. I have to
Yep.
rest up and we'll go pursue him to the next location. And the problem is, from what I've read of some of the, they're not heavily reviewed online, but there's one where there's supposedly a marauding Bigfoot creature, which sounds really cool, but the
Yeah.
reviews are like, there's not enough Bigfoot in this thing. Or
Yeah.
there's a werewolves, and there's not enough werewolves in this thing. So it's like he's kind of teasing it and almost there, but he just falls back to the standard Western stuff, which is cool if you like that. But if you're going to promise the marauding Bigfoots, you better deliver some marauding Bigfoots,
Yeah, I
right? I
agree.
mean, it's
Cool. Well, I know Robert E. Howard will deliver because he's a cool author.
Howard delivers that stuff, even in his straight adventure stories.
Yeah,
So
he totally does.
you're in really good hands with him. But I also recommend Louis L'Amour. He's not to everyone's taste, but he's a really good writer. He's a top-notch storyteller, and I know Steve at Heroic Book Adventures read the Cherokee Trail, and he recommended that highly for as a starting point. I just did a conversation about one of L'Amour's kind of swashbuckler period historical adventures with Eric at the Paperback Warrior, and he really recommended, I think it's Chansey, and some other of his. There's just I'd recommend Heller with a Gun. I mean, there's so many good books by L'Amour, and he'd be worth giving a try as well. So if you don't like L'Amour, I would say traditional westerns are probably not for you. So
Yeah.
but
Lamore's everywhere. Every time I go to a bookstore, I see lots and lots
yeah,
of
you're
Lamore
never
stuff.
going to have a trouble to find
Yeah.
him. So
Shouldn't be too hard.
you could, and they're much of a muchness. They're all really well done, and there are plenty of differences to make them interesting. But you could just say, "Oh, that one looks cool," and pick it up, and you'd probably get a pretty
Yeah.
good taste of what L'Amour has to offer. So
Cool, man. Well, yeah. Well, Jeff, thanks for coming on, and thanks for helping me. Make heads or tails of Spectros here, and talking about westerns and the genre and Doc Savage. Really appreciate your guidance because you're a real resource when it comes to this stuff.
Oh, thanks, man. I'm glad to help
Yeah.
out. It was really fun to talk to you.
Yeah.
And I hope you try another Western in the future, and especially maybe one of those Robert E. Howard ones, and let us know what you think.
Yeah. Cool, man. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks, man. Keep on trucking. You're doing a great job.
All right. Thanks, you too, buddy. See you later.